So, if you follow this idea all the way through, the notion that DNA might function like a kind of jailer, keeping conscious beings incarcerated in flesh, actually connects with several radical philosophical and technological movements. These perspectives suggest that the biological drive for survival may not be the blessing we usually assume it is. Instead, it might represent a repeating cycle of struggle and suffering, one that humanity might someday attempt to break using technology. Now, several philosophical frameworks explore this idea in different ways. One of the most well-known is antinatalism. Antinatalism argues that bringing new people into existence is ethically problematic. The reasoning is fairly simple, though controversial. Life inevitably includes suffering, illness, frustration, and death. And because no one can consent to being born in the first place, reproduction becomes a kind of gamble with another being's future pain. Some thinkers take this idea even further. That's where something called Efilism comes in. Efilism, life spelled backwards, extends antinatalist thinking to all sentient creatures. In this view, the entire biological system driven by DNA is fundamentally flawed. The evolutionary process is seen as producing endless cycles of harm, competition, and predation. From that perspective, the most ethical long-term outcome would be the gradual winding down of sentient life, simply to prevent further suffering. There's also a psychological concept that fits into this conversation. It's called the hedonic treadmill. This idea describes how human beings tend to return to a baseline level of happiness even after major positive events. Promotions, achievements, new relationships, these things bring a burst of joy, but the effect fades. Soon the mind resets and begins chasing the next goal. Some philosophers argue that this is another example of biological wiring at work. The system keeps people striving, desiring, and competing. Contentment is brief, but dissatisfaction pushes us forward. In that sense, the treadmill keeps the evolutionary engine moving. Now, here's where things get especially interesting. Some futurists and transhumanists believe that technology might eventually allow humanity to hack or bypass parts of this biological system. One possibility involves genetic editing. Technologies like CRISPR-Cas9 already allow scientists to directly modify sections of DNA. Today, the focus is mostly on treating genetic diseases, but some futurists imagine a future where genome editing could remove predispositions toward chronic pain, depression, or other forms of suffering directly from the human germline. Another idea, much more speculative, is mind uploading. The concept is simple to describe, but incredibly difficult to achieve. The idea is that one day it might be possible to copy or transfer the structure of a human mind into a computer system. If that were possible, consciousness could theoretically exist without a biological body at all. In that scenario, the mind would be separated from flesh and from the evolutionary pressures driven by DNA. There are also more immediate ambitions within transhumanism. Instead of just curing diseases, some researchers talk about enhancing human capabilities. That could mean improving memory, expanding cognitive ability, strengthening emotional regulation, or dramatically extending lifespan. The goal would be to move beyond what nature originally designed, creating humans who are, in a sense, better than well. And then there's the idea of synthetic genomes. Scientists have already begun discussing projects that involve synthesizing large sections of DNA artificially. In theory, one could eventually construct an entire human genome from scratch. If that became possible, it might allow future generations to be designed with predetermined biological traits rather than relying on the randomness of natural inheritance. But of course, trying to break out of biology brings its own set of ethical and psychological risks. One concern is the question of identity. Some patients who have received advanced brain implants have reported strange experiences. They sometimes feel as though the device is influencing their thoughts or emotions. In some cases, people describe the unsettling sensation that the technology has become part of them, or that it is controlling them in subtle ways. Another challenge involves the complexity of genetics itself. Genes rarely operate in isolation. They interact in complicated networks that scientists are still struggling to fully understand. So when researchers attempt to edit genes to remove certain diseases, they may accidentally influence other traits as well, things like temperament, cognition, or personality. And finally, there's a broader evolutionary concern. Modern medicine already changes the course of natural selection. By allowing people with certain genetic vulnerabilities to survive and reproduce, medical systems preserve genes that might once have disappeared from the population. Over time, this could make future generations increasingly dependent on technology rather than on biological resilience. So, the attempt to escape the influence of DNA, if humanity ever truly pursues it, could become one of the most profound and complicated experiments in the history of our species.